Welcome to the Coffee Buzz. I am Brad. Thank you so much for joining me today. Really glad you could make it. We got to talk about mushroom coffee. I keep seeing the ads for it. I guess the algorithm has me all figured out. They know that I love coffee. And so I get these ads, and I'm sure you've seen them too, where they're using mushrooms somehow as coffee. Now, I know I shouldn't judge things that I haven't tried yet, but it just looks and sounds disgusting. I mean, I love a portobello as much as any person, but using it for coffee has never occurred to me. So unless someone comments and tells me, Brad, you have got to try the mushroom coffee. It is a game changer. It's going to change your coffee journey. I'm probably not going to do it. It's just that for one reason, I mean, coffee is perfect as is. It might be the most perfect drink in all the world. You know, if you take out insomnia as a slight side effect. Other than that, though, it really can't be beat. So let me know. I don't know. I can't stray away from it. Coffee is like the greatest gift to mankind ever. Besides maybe Carlos Castaneda. He's been on my mind a lot lately. I read a few of his books back when I was in my early 20s, and I really enjoyed them, but reading them now, they take on a whole new meaning, and it's kind of interesting whenever you do that. After some life experience, you go back to a book, and for me, one of two things happens. Like, I either overappraised it and it wasn't as good as I thought, or it completely blows me away in a whole new way. And that's what happened with Carlos Castaneda. There is a certain bit of controversy around this guy. He was an anthropologist, back in the 60s, wrote numerous books claiming to have been given information and lessons from a Toltec shaman by the name of Don Juan Matus. Now, the anthropology community has all but said he never did any of that. He just made the whole thing up. And I'm kind of the mindset that it really doesn't matter because, the insights and lessons from Don Juan, be him fictional or real, are so good and so, life-changing that I don't really care if it's made up. In fact, I might be more impressed if Castaneda just wrote the whole thing himself, because that would mean that, he is the shaman, not Don Juan. But if we take him at his word, Don Juan believed in two levels of cognition. He, of course, recognized the one that most of us normies have here in the Western world, but he also talked about this level of seeing that shamans, where they can actually visualize different levels of energy in the world. And the way he described humans was really interesting. He said that humans looked like a luminous egg, like a ball of energy. And it's in this ball of energy that we have what he called an assemblage point. And this is where the perception of a person is formed. It's from there that basically our worldview is manufactured. And because these shamans lived in these different levels of cognition, they could observe what he called energetic facts. For instance, an energetic fact would be that because of our, cognitive reality, everything that, we have in our world, everything around us is defined by that. And that it could actually be altered. These are not givens. And that is different from a lot of what I have heard over the years. There are those that believe that, you're born a certain way. You have a certain personality. I'm Italian. I have this, particular personality trait, or, my parents were crazy, angry people, so that means I am too. I get it from them. And, what, in my opinion, what Don Juan is talking about here with this energetic fact about our process of cognition not being fixed is really what modern science refers to as neuroplasticity, in that we can actually change our personalities. It's just a matter of training and repetition. And part of the process that he, suggested that people go through in order to do this was called recapitulation. And it is a systematic scrutiny of one's life. And it's not done like in a judgmental way or hostile or even nostalgic. It's just an effort to understand where you are, how you got there, and to change its course. And he even said that, if a person does this, if they go through and they catalog their life from birth to where they are now, that there's really no way of going back to the same life. And another aspect of Don Juan that was very interesting to me is this concept of intent. And this isn't so much like I'm setting a goal and I'm going to go for it. That's my intention. The shamans looked at intent as energy that flows through the universe. And they considered it a pervasive force all around us. Part of this, it goes into what he called the controlled folly. The shaman must know that his acts are useless, but he has to pretend as if he didn't know that. In Don Juan's mind, like, all decisions are basically meaningless because they all lead to nowhere, which is ultimately the whole, the existential crisis that we kind of sometimes go through. And it might sound like a subtle nuance to know that it's useless, but just pretend that it's not. But what it does is kind of give life a little bit less seriousness, a little bit more levity around, what we try to accomplish, what our goal are, what we think our meaning is. And I think that subtle nuance is very, very important. And if one can master that, maybe life doesn't seem so dire all the time. He goes on to say that a shaman lives by acting, not by thinking about acting, nor by thinking about what he will think when he's finished acting. A warrior chooses his path with heart. He chooses the path with heart, any path with heart, and he follows it. And in this way, he is completely divorced from outcomes. And I think that is kind of the opposite of the way most people approach life. Most people obsess over the outcomes and ignore the path. And I think the how of what we do is more important than the what the outcome will be. And intent is part of that. It's not a thought. It's not an object or a wish. Intent is what we can make. It's basically what makes a person succeed when their thoughts tell them they're defeated. Intent is what makes us invulnerable. And it's something that I believe is kind of hardwired into our human spirit. And it's all about getting rid of our self-importance. That's when we can truly identify what our intent is. And one of the ways that we basically take ourselves too seriously is by talking to ourselves. Don Juan had a great quote in The Separate Reality. He says, when we talk to ourselves incessantly about our world, we maintain our world through our internal thought. And when we finish talking to ourselves about our world, the world is as it should be. And we renew it, we rekindle it by upholding our internal talk. We choose our paths as we talk to ourselves. Thus, we repeat the same choices over and over until the day we die. And the shaman is aware of this and strives to stop the internal talk. There's a lot of debate out there about whether or not humans have free will. And I've seen a lot of very intelligent people that claim that we do not. And I think we do, but most people don't use it. And that's one of the ways, is what he's talking about here, is that if we are constantly in this echo chamber in our minds, just constantly talking to ourselves, reaffirming the story that we are living, that could be a way to totally negate free will. And another part of that recapitulation that I talked about earlier, and it goes into this talking to oneself, is the personal history that we all have. Don Juan says, a warrior doesn't need personal history. One day he finds it's no longer necessary and he drops it. Personal history needs to be renewed by telling parents, family, friends, everything that what we do. And on the other hand, the shaman has no need for personal history, so he makes no explanation. And this is a way to avoid getting pinned down by people's thoughts and expectations. And over-explaining ourselves all the time, I think it's when that internal chatter kind of comes out loud. It's a way to sort of reaffirm, the ego's story, and that what we're doing is right, and you just constantly go around explaining everything to everyone. But it's not necessarily that humans are bad and they have to be corrected, but it's the way that we were born really is through stories like this. People tell us from the time we're born, like, the world is this way, it's that way, it's such and such, and we're inclined to believe them because up until we're 7 years old, we're like in this theta brain state where it's like a new phone where you got to download all the apps. Oh, there's an app for personal relationships. Here's the app for finances. Here's the app for happiness or lack thereof. And that recapitulation is so important because it allows us to zoom out, and look at this whole story objectively and figure out what we think, why we think it, how we got here. And at that point, we can discard the things that don't serve us. In fact, Don Juan said that we can drop any belief at any time and completely change our intent. It's just up to us to go through that personal history and drop it all together. And when I first heard that, back 20 years ago or so, I thought, well, I've just got to go live on a mountain, and not talk to anybody. But that's not what he's getting at here. It's just a way to get rid of self-importance, because as long as we think we are the most important thing in the universe, we really can't appreciate the wonder that goes on all around us. We're like a horse with blinders on. And when we see ourselves this way, like knowing everything, having it all figured out, and there's no mystery to the universe at all, we kind of see ourselves apart from everything else. And I think this is where a lot of anxiety and angst from the human condition arises, is this constant need to feel like we are in control and that we know everything. There's nothing I don't think more important than just the observance of just how awe-inspiring this universe is, just watching the night sky or a sunrise or a bird in a tree. Just like, how did this all come about? Like, there's so much that we don't know about. And just to acknowledge that is very humbling, but it also kind of gives us a little bit of ease to get through life. But it's important to rid ourselves of that self-importance in our personal history. It can be a delightful process, in my opinion. One of the things that Don Juan talks about that reminds me a lot of the Stoics is that this concept of death as a teacher, he talks about it being a companion, and it really gives our life like urgency and kind of keeps our minds from spinning out of control, because we need that perspective. As he puts it, death is our eternal companion and is always to our left. Death is the only wise advisor that a warrior needs, whether he feels that everything is going wrong. Whenever he feels that everything is going wrong and that he's about to be annihilated, he can turn to his death and ask, "Is this so?" And death will let him know that he is wrong and that nothing really matters outside of its touch. His death will tell him, "I haven't touched you yet." It's a way of kind of keeping our ego in check. Like, whenever our mind gets out of control and it starts catastrophizing over how bad things are, all we have to do is, recognize that death is always there. And it might not be a situation where we're going to die. So is it that important? Don Juan would say no. But I don't know. This keeps things into perspective. And if fully appreciated, if we really take in this concept, it puts attention on every day, every action, and it can sharpen our intentions. Thank you so much for watching and listening today. I really appreciate that. If you liked this video, please give me a thumbs up. If you're listening on the podcast and you want to help me out, just tell a friend. You can reach out to me at thecoffeebuzzpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find all my backlog episodes there as well. And thank you again. I will talk to you next week.